So we don't get, I would like to one day get to, you know, a billion players and tens of millions of unicorns, if not more. That would be kind of the ultimate dream there. I have no idea what that would mean for things like, things like price. I think the design of the system, the reason we have a DAO, the reason we let the community so actively vote and make real meaningful changes to the overall system is because that's the whole purpose, right? It is designed to evolve to external, it's designed to evolve to survive, right? And in this case, the community just voted through kind of what I would consider to be economic tightening measures. And that to me seems to signal that the community feels we've hit a good place with the number of coins that we currently have relative to our daily active wallets. And we'll have to see how that plays out if daily active wallets scale 2 or 3x, as we hope here in the near term off the back of marketing plans. As for the second part of the question around like the digital real world business, we are very interested in things like comics, movies, toys. Obviously, the kind of small shadow corn toy set with the kind of custom shadow corns coupled with the eggs that will be handing out to people who hatched early here in the near term is kind of a first step in beginning to experiment with getting our brand out there and in the real world. All the lore and fiction world building that we're doing is the first step on things like comics, movies, and TV. I've mentioned in the past, we've had conversations with groups like the Gotham Group, CAA, which is a massive talent agency, kind of WME and CAA basically split Hollywood in half in terms of their representation of actors and things of that nature, influencers and stuff. We've already had kind of conversations with them, and the first step in taking our IP out there and saying, hey, this would make a really good TV show, or hey, this would make a really good comic, or hey, this would make a really good movie, is to have effectively what is a fiction Bible. So the lore that the community is building is the catalyst to that, right? And the ultimate end goal is to get our fiction Bible together and then to go out and begin to pitch this story really across the board. And personally, I would love to get picked up by one of the streaming services. I think there'd be a really good fit on that front. And over time, you're going to see us move more and more aggressively into trying to get our brand out there in the real world. And for me, kind of first and foremost, what matters is exposure and just getting awareness to increase with these efforts. And I think a secondary kind of knock-on effect is just going to be, the potential for additional revenue into the treasury, which would obviously continue to make us sustainable or continue to kind of chart our path towards sustainability. So there's a lot of really exciting things there. I've kind of had some fights recently with some of our investors who predominantly are just games investors, right? And so they don't get a lot of what we're trying to do in terms of building an overall ecosystem, trying to further the brand and the IP. And I've long looked at companies like Doodles and Yuga, some of the other kind of like early groups that had early success in the profile pic kind of market. You can see most of them are pivoting towards trying to be gaming companies. I think it's a lot harder to pivot that way than it is for us to start as a gaming company. That is our DNA, and then pivot into being kind of brand and IP builders. And so, if I look around and say, what do I want to be? Well, I want to be the project that, again, I'm kind of jealous of you guys. I feel like they get away with doing very, very little and delivering very, very little relative to what we've delivered, relative to the expectations that are kind of put on us by ourselves and by the community. And I very much want to chart a path towards crypto unicorns, not just being known as like a gaming IP, but being known as like an IP and a brand, that really resonates with people globally, right? And it just goes back to the kind of the last paragraph of the first page of the white paper, right? We seek to build a generational IP here, and getting into the real world via some of the things that were mentioned in this question, I think is a big stepping off point for our plans there.
All right, perfect. Okay, next up we have an anonymous person excited about Team RPG, as you should. What happens if the community is pretty split and would love to have both games? For reference, we're talking about Auto Battler and Match 3. Is there a world where the one game gets developed and polished first, and the other one isn't just thrown in the trash but developed after the first one is done?
It is certainly possible. I think the core game team, Laguna, will only build one version. But that's not to say that we couldn't have another second or even third party studio show up and carry forward um, the battle loop that we're not building, right? And treat that more similar to Rainbow Rumble and like Unicorn Party games, where there's economic interoperability in the underlying assets. Um, they have separate game banks and things of that nature, right? But I could definitely see that. From my perspective, I would personally want to see a very, very tight vote to begin to justify that. I think if we see an overwhelming desire for one of the loops over another, we kind of have that initial signal. Um, but if you're talking on a long, long time scale, right, the whole goal is to build this entire ecosystem of game titles. And so I could see if there's enough support from the community, one of those titles getting picked off the shelf down the road and maybe refined further. And again, whether that's a second or a third party developer, it would definitely be of interest. I think right now, I kind of expect we'll see really strong signal around one of the loops. My ask to the community is that you really do take the 6 weeks to spend time playing each loop, regardless of what your bias is going into the experiment, and take the time to really think through like what is going to help us maximally onboard players, what is going to give us the highest kind of skill curve and opportunity to really attempt to build an esports pillar around this kind of core critical loop. And kind of go from there. So it's an interesting question. It's one we'll have to see how things kind of play out. Um, but there is a world in which we might build both over time.
I hope we live in that timeline. Praying for it. Okay, next up we have someone asking regarding Unim, is there any price you want it to stabilize at with quantitative easing? This would probably make the cost/return more easy to calculate. So basically, it would allow you to calculate your ROI somewhat reliably and thus make investing into the game more attractive, maybe.
That's a dangerous question because that may be psyops. We obviously see people buying
Really?
when we buy, dumping against us. That behavior is pretty small. They're small fish, so it's not really super concerning to us right now. But operating under everything's a little bit psyops. That seems to be a question designed to get me to say, "Oh, we're trying to get it here." And the reality is, we don't give a shit about price. We give a shit about quantity and building protocol-owned liquidity, right? So, of the 225 million Unim in existence today, which has largely been flat, I guess since the Quest release, and you can see that on chain. Um, we're pushing almost 50% of that is protocol owned at this point. And we will continue to purchase and build protocol owned um, liquidity probably throughout Q2 of this year. So over the next 3 months, we plan to continue to increase liquidity. So the goal really has nothing to do with price; it has everything to do with liquidity. I've told people time and time again, the price of Unum to date has largely just been a meme because we always had really very thin liquidity. Um, and so you could buy or sell a very small amount of Unum and move the price a lot, right? That's what thin liquidity means. And so the way I've started to think about it is like liquidity represents a bridge to and from our economic network. And low liquidity is a thin, rickety, very scary looking bridge, right? And what we're trying to do by increasing protocol owned liquidity is kind of signal to the wider world, like crypto unicorns as an economy is open for business and is robust and not something that you're like, wow, I can't even purchase, $1,000 worth of Unum without moving the price 10, 15%. And that was the reality, even a week or so ago. Right. So over time, the goal is to eventually hit the point where price is begins to stabilize. I think the thing we do not want is to just see prices uh, cascade down continually. That is not the right signal when you start to think about our tokens as a product. And so, providing some level of stability there, which is not just the quantitative easing efforts, it is very much how we're tuning and balancing the game, the sources and sinks inside and outside of the game. What is the new player demand? Are we seeing daily active wallets increase? Are these new players coming in and purchasing these assets and playing the game? So there's a number of factors kind of all wrapped in together. And the idea that, again, it is very much around increasing protocol owned liquidity um, so that it is way less frictionless. It is way more frictionless to enter and exit the economy. That's very, very important. And again, the amount of Unum that is not held in protocol owned liquidity is tiny. We're going to need over 150 million Unum just to evolve the babies that exist today. What happens when we have another 1,000 farm wallets come online, right? And so this data has been available for a long time and been open to the public. And I think our player base has not really understood how little Unum exists. And as we're building liquidity, we're obviously soaking up a lot of the supply in tandem with launching like the Season of Advancement event, which is effectively our spring leaderboard for the farm game. So anyway, that's not a question I can answer really directly, but I hope I've given some context through my answer as to what our strategy is and what we care about most. And, if I take the less malicious version of this question, over time, the idea is to get it to a certain price, whatever that price may be. The market will land that price. We are not targeting that price. And the hope is that it begins to stabilize. And that will allow people who are coming in and looking to purchase Unum and progress and do certain things, right? They will have the ability to go, okay, I can kind of sort of rely on it being roughly within this price band, and I'm not worried about it, collapsing 90% over, the next 6 months, which would make any strategy, regardless of if you're trying to be hardcore, pure ROI extractive, which again, we're always going to try and make that pure ROI extractive strategy as hard as possible. And the reality there is like, if you don't understand that every person cannot show up here and put $1 in and get $1.10 out, you're obviously not here for the right reasons. So I hope that answered the question and gave context around what we're doing with QE and what our plans are, at least through Q2.
Very, very good answer. Not today, chat. Okay, last anonymous question that we have is, what do you think about making a promo campaign, which is the opposite of simply airdropping coins and land? So you would basically have a milestone-based type of reward. So the first card level 3, first card level 6, etc. And once you complete all of those, you'd get the rewards for it. This would basically prevent dumping, boost the market, and incentivize people to actually play the game.
We were thinking very similarly. This has been an idea that I've wanted from the beginning. It's just been hard to implement in the context of literally everything else that we have going on. But the idea of having a tailored onboarding program relative to these campaigns that says, hey, it's not just about this bundle that we're giving you to try the game for free. Like there is a whole, what we would normally call like a daily login bonus kind of program with milestones and achievements, right? So I am actively talking to the design and the product teams around how we can structure effectively noob leaderboards that you only qualify for if you were granted a bundle. And so this isn't a thing that requires new feature work from our engineering team. Like we already have the capability of doing this with our analytics system that we've developed, coupled with our ability to like airdrop things inside of the game to players. Um, we will never 100% kill off dumping. I disagree with a lot of the takes that I've seen around, oh, the great corn drop has led, quote unquote, to like the floor price dipping so significantly. I'm not sure that that is actually substantiated by data at scale relative to just other players capitulating. Um, so we'll have to see. I think there's other things that we need to do in tandem with the great corn drop, like QE and further marketing efforts and other surprises that we have in store for y'all that will help. People should receive a bundle and go, oh my God, I got so lucky. I can now start to play this game. Like I'm just pumped, right? That's the mentality that we want. But I don't disagree with the idea that we should have these custom tailored onboarding programs, reward programs, and that is exactly what we are thinking about internally and attempting to implement in the near term. So I really love that idea. It lines up with what we're thinking, and yeah, my only caveat is like you're never going to prevent people from 100% dumping, right? And I have zero desire to go and build a bunch of features or like give them a fake NFT that lets them try and all this kind of stuff. Like part of this win here, and one of the ways that we beat traditional free-to-play advertising. Traditional free-to-play advertising says, "Hey, try my game for free, please, 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 right? Try my game for free. Try my game for free." We're over here like, here's real value, and you can come try our game for free, right? But I agree, placing additional carrots, if you will, in the game itself to further incentivize people to lock, participate in the game and play. Great idea, 100%. We plan to implement in the near term.
All right. Okay, let's see. Oh, we do have another last minute anonymous question. They're asking any additional plans or updates to convince people to play jousting.
Every 2 weeks, the design team will further tweak and tune the tournaments in an attempt to get more and more participation into jousting. Generally, I think we're finding our player base, many of you are not risk takers in the slightest, and that's fine. Jousting may not be for all of you. I am disappointed in the early numbers, but I believe that via tuning, we can continue to tweak the tournament structures, the requirements in particular to enter those tournaments, such that I kind of want everybody to go, well, shit, I lose out not at least attempting it once a day with my top corn, right? Are we ever going to create a situation where the shittiest stat corns can win the grand jousting tournament and win the prize pool at the end of that? Like, no, that defeats the entire purpose of the breeding game. What I would hope is that people have realized breeding is very important. Breeding is also a thing that helps with economic sustainability, given it's a massive sink of resources. So if you have not been breeding, you need to start to think about what your strategy is if you intend to be a dominant player on the farm sim. Like that's the reality of it, right? Like people ask time and time again, when are stats going to matter? When are stats going to matter? Now stats really do matter, and it's been a little frustrating to see some of the players pissed off. Now, again, letting a high stat corn come in and grief in a low stat tournament, inappropriate, incorrect. I've already delivered my feedback to our design team, and I think they've already made changes that took a great step forward. And you're going to see us continue over the course of preseason. Again, that's why we're doing a preseason. Us tweaking and tuning that. The ultimate goal being we want to see the number of jousts per day go up. That is absolutely a target goal. And I think we've got a strategy in place on that front to do it, right? The only caveat here, similar to this Unum QE stuff, is like I'm never going to create a situation where a really terrible corn can like go for it and win like the Triple Crown tournament, right? That would completely defeat the purpose of the breeding game itself. On the breeding game, obviously, some of you discovered the Breeder DAO dashboard before it gets announced on Monday. On Monday, we'll be making a big announcement on that front. If you're really interested in beginning to understand the genes, the gene chances, like how you can take and mix and match the corns that you have to try to find an optimal pairing and then begin to attempt breeding that with obviously high tier breeding and Evo boosters. The Breeder DAO dashboard is a great first step forward. We're going to follow that up with Jeff's Breeding for Dummies guide, which should kind of just further summarize a lot of the data that's been shared in many channels, both by our design team as well as other players who've been really into the breeding game. And then, of course, in May, we have the kind of nursery redesign, which will begin to surface a lot of that data in game so that you can make more informed choices. Up until now, you've had to put in the work. This is one of the things, this is a hill I'll die on. Like, we created a very complex system, and the players that took the time to figure it out have the advantage now. And quite frankly, they should, period. Right now, not allowing them to come in and grief in low tier tournaments, those kind of things need to get tweaked, need to get tuned. We do have an internal mandate of trying to drive as many jousts per day. And obviously, like, we need more players, just generally more player liquidity is what we started to refer to internally, right? To make sure that tournaments are filling at a decent clip and cadence. And so there's, I'd say there's a number of factors there that we are looking at to try to improve the overall jousting experience and, again, incentivize as much participation as possible in that loop.
All right. Okay. Oh, a couple of add-ons to that. LG Jeff is in the As It Does channel. He answers questions related to jousting every now and then. So the design team really is on the lookout and is making sure that the community sees the improvement from patch to patch as we create better.
We've been kind of having this internal joke, just to kind of add on to that, where it's like, if you as a community member legitimately have a great idea, we're just going to implement it, right? So keep the feedback coming, right? Maybe you've thought of a way to, do the stat requirements that, just sets up this perfect system, right? I have seen an improvement in the win-loss ratios, and players are not able to grief like they were at the very beginning. So we've already seen improvement. I expect we'll continue to see that over the course of preseason and then be in a really big, really great place with the Grand Jousting Tournament, which will kick off at the end of preseason. And just from a pure incentive perspective, we're planning to put a very large prize at kind of the end of that Grand Jousting Tournament. So there should be a pretty big moment on that front where, players are like, oh wow, I need to try this, just because the opportunity will be rather significant and should bring some press and some PR around it as well. I am debating whether it should be USDC or we buy something like, a couple of crypto punks or something crazy. So I've been thinking about that. I'd be curious to hear feedback from the community on whether we should go buy some quote unquote blue chip profile picks and hand those out as rewards relative to USDC. So I'd like some feedback on that. I'll be checking Discord later. Hit me up.
All right, team. You heard that, community. So chat, let us know. USDC or what you want? We do have some feedback on Breeder DAO. We have Goliath Rule saying that Breeder DAO is amazing, using it every time now.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's made things a lot easier for sure. And those who have it, to date, if you've been using the Telegram bots and stuff, those were a phenomenal tool. But obviously, they were predominantly behind paywalls and things of that nature. And so I was very excited to get this partnership done with Breeder DAO. And yeah, I'm happy to hear that, Goliath. It's been very helpful for me as well.
Okay, and with that, we are done with the anonymous questions. Time check, we have 25 minutes. We're getting started on the written questions. Now, if you want to speak, just raise your hand. Okay, we have Crazy Crypto asking, great initiative on the spring event and breeding cost proposal to give Unum a better chance to increase its value through the sinks. However, the spring event will only last for 3 months. Will there be a replacement sink or more meaningful sinks introduced during or after the event to continuously stabilize Unum price or for it to pump further?
The short answer is yes. Short answer
Hell
is
yeah.
yes. I mean, again, what I said at the very beginning, there's 150 over 150 million unum needed to just evolve the babies that exist today, right? How much unum do you need to spend in crafting to get a land to level 10, right? So there is not enough unum in existence, especially with scale, right? So I don't look here and have any concern at all with being able to balance unum in particular over time. And I think people have probably noticed that RBW has largely been a net sink into the game since we shipped jousting. Like those things are really very, very phenomenal. That I really don't think there's other projects that can say they've done that. Like we've now proven we could go from RBW being a net sink to being a net source with the initial ship of Quest to retightening that. Um, and getting back into a net sink and just showing that we can kind of rebalance the economy as we have gives me a lot of confidence that unlike our predecessors, which were able to get the flywheel going, but then it completely fell off the rails the second new Dow wasn't coming in. And this is Pegaxi, this is Axie, this is Steppen. Um, I'm very confident based on what we've already proven we can do, which is just an amazing shout out. We were less than 30 days from May 5th, and that signals 365 days of live operations, which is pretty phenomenal. I'm super super proud of our ability to do that over the period of time that we have, and so that's where my kind of confidence comes from. If we can get scale from 2,000 or so monthly active wallets to 10K to 15 to 20, um, the economic depth of the system scales with that, right? Because you have more sinks as more players enter and are trying to upgrade and trying to breed and trying to evolve, right? The community obviously put forward and voted through, right, this increase in costs around the LVM, around breeding, around Evo. So there was a lot of things there, crazy crypto, that are lined up to be pretty big catalysts, right? And that's I think why I've got so much confidence that we're going to be able to I keep saying like we've not seen an economy of our size and scale spin up in the space, and now we're trying to get that moving. Right, we're trying to expand and scale the player base, and that's what gets me really excited about even the kind of short to midterm future ahead of us.
Big hype. Okay, we have a second question from Crazy Crypto. Will C's treasury value be affected from the de-dollarization and will it lose its value? We are definitely going for long term with CU. Should CU be considering to diversify our treasury holdings to other currency assets as well in the long term rather than holding 100% in a USD based asset?
Yeah, that is a good question. I'll tell you that the I think I shared this before, but the most stressed I've been since we started down this path was when USDC hit 88 cents. And part of that stress was less so about do we sell at this loss to just not be screwed if it goes down further. And of course, I've spent the entire weekend watching the 1 minute chart on Parsec and seeing some of the just massive amounts of PvP that was kind of going on as people were buying that dip and then selling Unum, or I mean, selling USDC. Um, Again, what was ironic about all of that is I was stressed because USDC is the thing I'm not supposed to have to worry about, right? I'm supposed to have to worry about the Ethereum that we have in the treasury. And the reason we were worried about USDC is its exposure to the fucking US banking system. And that to me is just like maybe in fact there is a real reason to have a non-state controlled money system that collectively and globally we all control a small piece of, or we all have permissionless ability to kind of enter and exit this thing. And so it it's a valid point. I think right now it's very hard to find a stable coin that isn't backed in some form by USDC. Obviously, DAI is has a huge chunk of its backing is USDC. LUSD, which is the liquidity protocol, um, that has been around, I think, 2 years now. I think it just had its 2-year birthday. I've used it in my own funds pretty heavily. It's an immutable contract. You put Ethereum in, you take out LUSD against that Ethereum. It's been through several market cycles, and the mechanism has held up. It has not had an exploit. But if we begin to take a pretty big chunk of or convert from USDC to LUSD, pretty big chunk of our treasury, like we are taking risk again on Ethereum. And so it's interesting. We're at this point where we're literally having a conversation where we're worried about USD. And that's pretty crazy since, the whole petrodollar and all that crap. I mean, the last few decades as the world's reserve currency, and we're kind of seeing that shift now. So I guess I'd answer it by saying I am evaluating treasury diversification into assets that are not necessarily reliant on USD. But I have not made any decisions on that front yet. But it is we're living in kind of a wild time right now, and it is important that we think about worst case scenarios and how we survive those. I do think the ratio of stablecoin, even if it is USDC to ETH, is good in our treasury right now. And you could kind of see, like, if buy us bet or whatever, I think we're going to see $1 million Bitcoin, and I guess he's 60 days away or so from that multi-million-dollar bet he made. Like, I don't think so. And if we really see that occur, like, the global economy is not in a good place, right? As much as countries are moving away from the dollar, it's still pretty important. So that's a tough question to answer. I'm glad the community is thinking about it. Treasury diversification is something that we are internally looking at. And gun to the head right now, I'd probably be moving a chunk of our USDC into LUSD. USDT to me has always had a specter of concern around it, and that seems a little scarier to me. I really liked the meme that had USDC on one side, and it was a see-through cabinet, a glass cabinet. You could see that the plates were like falling, right? And so you knew if you'd open the cabinet, the plates were going to fall out. And then the other side, it had USDT, and it was just a wood cabinet. You have no fucking clue what's behind that, right? And I think that's kind of an appropriate meme. And so that's why I'd put stable coins like LUSD above USDT in terms of how we look to diversify the treasury itself. We could, like when we were sitting on BBUSD, what basically the balancer boosted pool, which I know the community kind of complained about, but for a while we were generating a pretty decent return off that. That's another option, but again, that's USDC, that's DAI, which are kind of just flavors of USDC, and then USDT. And during the whole USDC scare, you had those pools drastically change in that, Tether was obviously leaving those pools, right? So the ratio got off. Most of those pools are now back to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But again, it's something that we actively monitor and are looking at ways to further diversify. My hope is we start to see a little bit of a return to a bull run through mid this year. And at that point, likely would consider maybe taking some of our ETH, putting it in a trove, taking out LUSD against that, and using that as kind of a mechanism where we're not selling our ETH, but as its price appreciates, we're kind of pulling and putting stablecoin on the side, as a way to kind of diversify our treasury. Great question. Sorry for the rant. It's very complicated to try to think through what might be the right strategy there. And I'm always open to opinions from the community on different assets that we might look into. Just don't pitch me like, oh God, what was my first algo stable coin? Not Terra Luna. I never touched that shit. But it was, oh God. I'm gonna have to go back into one of my wallets and find that. Ample Fourth. Ample Fourth. Don't pitch me Ample Fourth. Don't pitch me. I'm a big fan of Frax, but Frax obviously has some USDC backing it, right? So it's another kind of die. I'll stop my rant there. Very complex question to try and answer. Treasury diversification is very, very important. And in a world in which USD is just another shitcoin, we do need to think about ways to protect ourselves. Part of that protection is, quite frankly, all the Ethereum that we're sitting on. That, to me, that things like that and Bitcoin are obviously the hedge against the dollar shitting the bed.
All right. Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, definitely not a rant. I'm sure the community appreciates all of that thought. An update. So in the Serious channel, people are starting the USDC versus CryptoPunk or any other blue chip discourse. If you have an opinion about that, please head over and share your thoughts. Next up, we have SW Morton 19 requesting to speak. Hey, Sam, please come on over.
Hey, what's up, guys? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Aaron. It's good to hear from you again. You've been active on the town hall scene lately, so we always appreciate that. I know it's a pain sometimes to take the time out of your day, but it's great. So my first question is, do the current breeding and evolving fees as well as the RMP tax, does that just subsidize the game bank and then you guys pull out from the game bank once it reaches like a certain threshold?
That's currently the plan. I've been talking to the team, our live operation team, about operationalizing that process. So there's a consistent cadence at which we take our fee kind of off the table. And when I say that, that would just be a transfer from the game bank back into the treasury. And we'll probably time that with the same cadence at which we're withdrawing Ethereum from the game bank, right? And again, just setting up and establishing a cadence so the community kind of understands whether that's once a month or say once a quarter. Because we do need to kind of make that accounting a little easier, where right now it's all in the game bank pool.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And then on the same line as the treasury, I was wondering how you're feeling about Runway and if you've thought at all about potentially raising again, in 6 to 12 months, if that does become a problem.
I'm personally feeling pretty good about Runway. The price of Ethereum does determine how good I'm feeling about that, right? And how, overall market kind of sentiment is a part of that, right? So the idea that things do seem to be looking a little better on the crypto space, especially after the brutal year that was 2022. As for raising additional financing, that's always a thing that I am evaluating and kind of looking for. I dipped a toe in those waters several times over the course of last year and even kind of earlier this year in January. And it was very clear that we're still in the trough of disillusionment with respect to Web3 gaming. Yes, there are some studios and stuff getting funding. Obviously, we've already kind of raised an enormous chunk of financing between the public and private token sale, as well as the original seed that Laguna raised. So we're in that awkward spot where I'd be going for a really large Series A, if not a small Series B. And for those unfamiliar with venture financing, a large A is tens of millions of dollars, right? A large B would be or a small B would be $50 million plus, right? So under trying to kind of achieve that, most of the feedback has been come back when you're at 30K plus down, right? Show you can scale. What are your customer acquisition costs? What is the LTV of those wallets that you've acquired, right? How is that LTV scaling over time? And so, these are appropriate questions to ask when you're, trying to raise at a 9-figure valuation, right? And so, it's one of the reasons that I've just kind of stepped away from trying to really push on financing and stayed really focused on growth. And so I think if we see an inflection point, there's still an enormous amount of capital that was raised to invest broadly in the crypto space as well as specifically in gaming. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars on the sidelines. And I mean, you should all fire me as kind of the project lead if I'm incapable in a growth scenario of raising, right? I do think I've already proven that when there's traction behind us and we're in a good market environment that I can bring in financing. So I'm not overly concerned about runway today. And I will likely look at further financing when we start to have some traction to point to and really show, hey, this is because at the Series A, Series B level, investors really want to understand that you have a growth engine. They're putting money into that engine to accelerate growth. So I have to really be able to show that, right? And that's very much a lot of what we're trying to get to with the kind of marketing and growth efforts. Do you have any follow-ups on that, Sam? But
No, that makes a lot of sense. I just like the launching of Jousting, like just proved to me that you guys are able to ship like a very clean, flawless, cool looking IP experience. So like the only concern for me is runway. Like if you guys had 3 years, I'd be feeling great. So that's the only reason I asked the question, to be honest.
yeah, for sure. It's something we'll continue to evaluate over the course of the next quarter, right? And there are situations where I go, okay, well, maybe I can't get, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, right? But I can get 10. And I certainly I would never put the project in a position where it's looking like it's going to run out of capital, right? Even if we have to do kind of a lower, valuation or a down round, as long as the terms are not too predatory. So I do want to make that point.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. And then the last question, you're gonna hate me for asking this one, but after the next
Hit me.
two to 3 months, let's say, like we've got so much launching. You guys have put out more game loops than 99% of other projects that are actually engaging, fun. You've got RNG, you've got skill based. If we don't see player growth, would you consider moving from Polygon to maybe an OP stack chain or somewhere else? Because I talk to a lot of crypto native people just day in and day out, and no one I know really uses Polygon that much. I'm kind of on my own there because I do play crypto unicorns on Polygon, but that's the only reason I ever use it. So I guess, yeah, that's my question.
I would love to see more people on Twitter saying I only use Polygon for crypto unicorns. I have kind of been in this state recently where I did get very frustrated with the Polygon team. The idea of like, here's all these super nets and oh my God, we've got the ZK EVM and they've got Vitalik doing the first transaction. And then it's like, oh, immutable ZK EVM, which is interesting in its own right because it's kind of immutable saying, oh, the Cairo VM that we were building on Starkware, I forget if it's Starkware or Starknet. I have too many damn terms in this space, but like it's kind of showing that they're like, oh, this isn't going to work and we're going to go over here and use the Polygon ZK EVM tech. And I'm over here like, shit, we've been deployed on proof of stake for 18 plus months now, right? And, what's happening? I feel a lot better coming out of a call that Rob, our technical director, and myself had with Matthew Rossi, who is Polygon's head of product. And we're going to see some Polygon improvement proposals, I believe, in the next 60 days that follow up from their upgrade in January to continue making the proof of stake experience better. And it kind of got me re-excited about what the kind of short to midterm outlook on Polygon is going to be. So we'll see, Sam. We have thought internally that if we really, really need to, we could pull the ripcord and do this major migration to somewhere else in the EVM. And for a while, kind of pre-Arbitrum shitting the bed with their ridiculous kind of governance snafu that just happened. I thought Arbitrum or Arbitrum Nova would be very interesting. There's something kind of compelling about maybe using a data availability solution, whether that's a Veil, which is getting spun out of Polygon. One of the co-founders is leaving to to build a veil. That gets really interesting because we could stay on proof of stake, but obviously not um, save costs, right? Reduce costs by having the data, transaction data, live in one of the data availability solutions. And so, anyway, not to play coy because I don't want to steal the thunder on some stuff that they shared with us, but be on the lookout for those Polygon improvement proposals. I think it's going to show their kind of commitment to proof of stake. They're not really leaving it behind. And one thing that I found very interesting is if you look at like zkEVM and the SuperNet stuff and some of their research in parallelization and things, they're kind of using some of these ecosystem chains, is what I'll call them, as experiments to kind of see what works and what doesn't. And they have a very compelling pitch to me around what the future of proof of stake looks like by kind of cherry picking some of the technological wins that we're seeing from other projects in the space. So I guess that's what I'd say to that, Sam. I definitely have had my frustrations with what has felt like a lack of focus on proof of stake. But again, I had a wonderful conversation with Matthew Rossi, their head of product, and he really reinforced like, here's where we are headed. And that gave me a lot more confidence than I'd had prior to that call. So I'll be interested to get other people's takes, including yours, once you kind of see these improvement proposals and kind of go from there. I think the hassle and pain that a migration would be, is a dangerous thing in and of itself, right? And so, particularly with like the ERC20s and how we get liquidity bridged across, and like it's a whole thing. So to me, it's like a final ripcord of like, this is just not working out. We need to find a new home, right? But to me, I want to try to I want to give them a chance to put some of these improvements in place that from my read are going to drastically improve the player experience of interacting with Polygon.
For sure. Makes a lot of sense. I guess I just haven't seen a game. Like I really would have loved had Axie used AXS as the governance token to secure their proof of stake sidechain. And I haven't seen a game on a roll up use their primary token. Like, yeah, you have IMX, but it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
And using RBW as like a decentralization mechanism for a sequencer would be like super novel. So I think that's cool, but agreed, like no need to make drastic changes before it's even necessary, but just something I'm thinking about. So I appreciate your time. Hopefully you have enough time to answer one other person's written question before your hard cut.
Thanks as always, Sam. Appreciate you coming up.
Of course. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, we got time for one more question.
We do.
All right. Okay. So this is the last one. Do you think that right now too many of C's assets are concentrated on a few major players' hands? Whenever the market crashes, major players tend to dump assets, mostly tokens, causing a higher degree of price drop than other crypto assets outside of CU, as observed from previous cycles. If the team also thinks this is unhealthy and negatively portraying CU to the public, does the team have any mitigating methods to overcome this inherent risk for our project?
The vast majority of dumping over 2022 was concentrated to passive stakers, right? And we proved in the data that, wallets that were actually playing the game were 2.5 times less likely to sell RBW rewards from staking than those that were just passively staking and dumping. And so I would say the 60% reduction in weekly staking emissions that we pushed through with a lot of drama and a little bit of hassle, but I still believe the majority of individuals within our community were in support of that. That to me was the solution that we put in place. And you can see since that change has occurred, even on kind of down days in the market, you're not seeing our token take as big of a hit as it was prior to that. So looking back, like I shouldn't have been as resistant in Q4 when Delphi began to really press on the idea of making that change. And I wish we'd done it quicker. I wish we'd done it quicker. So to me, that has put the initial, that was the first step. And then tightening the economy as we have, where now RBW predominantly is a net sink into the game on a daily basis. That's another phenomenal step forward. And the more that we can drive demand now against that, right, puts us in a really, really great position. So I would kind of argue that we've put in place and already gotten ourselves into a better position than we were previously. So um, I hope that answers whoever that question was from.
All right, perfect. Okay, and that is a wrap. Aaron has to go, guys. Your
I
boy
do. Ooh,
is
woo, running to the
yeah.
park. Thanks, everyone.
All
Bye.
right, run to the board. Bye.
Bye.
Love it. Ooh, okay, so I'm just gonna do the closing spiel now. That concludes our bi-weekly town hall number 35. So any questions that you have, be it in chat in this thread or in the town hall number 35 thread, will be answered later. We'll see you next time for the bi-weekly town hall number 36. That time with members of the internal team. Next week, I believe we will also have something special on the 13th. Keep your eyes peeled. We might have a surprise town hall. Check the announcements. We'll post a recording of this town hall on our socials if you would like to give it a re-listen. Don't forget to share this with your friends and fellow unicorn fam who couldn't make it. And if you have more burning questions, feel free to reach out on our support channels, the Mod Support channel and the That Ask the Dubs channel. This has been Sparkly Unicorn and Stealthy Unicorn hosting Curtsy Unicorn's co-founder and CEO Aron Beierschmitt. Good morning, good night, and see you in game, Unicorn.